morning, everyone. We are Group 1, and our topic for presentation today, like some of you have already picked up a similar topic, is to talk about the Cynefin framework and how that translated from moving from the axis to axis as the pandemic unfolded. Now, our focus today, and as you look at the slide there, you'll see the caption there talks about we looked at the mirror. And what we really wanted to focus on is, as a human resource function, what are the changes that we had to encounter and how that changed what we did till then. This is the story about 6 of us who are representing 6 different industries, and that's the data that we wanted to bring here. You'd see all industries there. But very quickly, I wanted to call out the group members right in front. Everyone, Jolene, round of applause, thank you. Rachita, right next to her there. Parikshit, I'm trying to figure out there. Parikshit, Sonam, and Manju. So that's group 1. And we call ourselves group Polymath because of exactly what you see. By the way, Polymath means people with different skills coming together, and that's what we represent as a group. So 6 different industries. Our focus primarily is to talk about 3 HR functions and how this translates over there. Very quickly, we do a recap. This is the Cynefin framework. What I want you to be with me, Anuj, as you look at the slide here, is we actually are talking about how we move from being in the obvious state, which is when everything was live and that's how we operated. And then suddenly this pandemic happened and we get into the stage of disorder. And from there, how the transition starts from getting to chaotic, complex, hopefully complicated. Right? Don't know if we'll get there. Very quickly, so what's the quick difference between, if you look at the disorder, and why we were in disorder is because you don't know out of this 4 where you are. You have to rely on making decisions quickly without really relying on a lot of facts and figures, right? So you are relying on your judgment and you are making decisions, and that's what transpired when the pandemic happened. What are the sources that we have used for our presentation? Obviously, we have looked at primary and secondary source. So we have looked at interview with key stakeholders and what was the outcome that transpired from there. We also looked at the employee survey data that I'm guessing all of us rolled out at some point. Engagement data from teams and the CSAT scores that we received. We also looked at some of the secondary research because this is a field where you don't have a best practice yet. And hence we were trying to understand what is it that others are doing. And so we looked at Deloitte Insights, Forbes, and the Burson Nordic, which is one of the companies that Josh Burson now owns. So we looked at some of the data from there as well as we build out where we are right now. What are we talking about? So the world around us changed, and it changed in more ways than one. Very quickly, right? There were new words which were introduced in our dictionary. First one, anyone doom scrolling, what does that mean? Srini, you are the youngest here, so what does doom scrolling mean?
I'm yet to learn, very young.
Very young, yeah. Learning alphabets right now, okay. Anyone doom scrolling? Word became very famous during the pandemic. This is when people are obsessed with looking at their digital screen because they don't have anything else to do.
Looks like a doomsday almost.
Just scrolling to kingdom come.
Absolutely. That's where the terminology comes from. The second one, Corona cut, anyone?
Yeah, the hackers that you read the account, you don't see.
Absolutely, right. Those are the hilariously bad haircut. Don't look at me, did not happen then, right? The hilariously bad haircut that people started giving themselves when the pandemic happened. So what you see on this slide is everything that was changing over the last 2 years. But I want to draw your attention to the last line there, that there was a lot of change that was happening in the HR world. Now, the HR, when the pandemic happened, really got into what we call a chaotic meeting. One fine day, the pandemic had hit us, and we had to suddenly make that decision saying everyone has to now work from home. So how does that translate to some of the decisions that were made in the state of disorder? And that's the first bit that we want to talk about today. Few things happened. Familiar? The offices were deserted, everyone was asked to work from home. Very quickly the decision was made, and then that's what was applied there. All employees were asked to work from home, so that was the second decision that was made. Did not happen in my company, I'm sure a lot of us did not have that. Devashish, I can take a question. No? Okay.
Don't worry.
No, I'm not worried. Come on. The IT infrastructure was crumbling with the work from home requirement. Never ever they had handled so many requests of people working from home, managing data and security there. Communication breakdown in teams and subsequently in the organization, because everyone suddenly was working in a remote manner. All live sessions were stopped, and talent development had to move to conduct virtual sessions because there are requirements, and suddenly you cannot do any live sessions there. All interviews by talent acquisitions were moved into being conducting virtually. Many offers were put on hold and were also revoked. Now, there was another quick impact that was happening. There are people who were stranded. I mean, imagine you were vacationing in Maldives and there was a lockdown and you had to work from there. So how do you manage that? So there was a tax implication, which for the first time the HR teams had to figure out how to manage that. How do we manage that worker who is not in our country, employed in our country, but is working in another country, right? So some of those things quickly had to be figured out. The first 6 months though, from an employee standpoint, worked out really fine. People decided to make the most of it, go to some place, work from there for a really long time. But then the challenges started creeping in. And here is some data to talk about how the tide really has turned. And this data, I spoke about the data sources, you'd see the data right here. Now this is industry-wise turnover trends. And industry are the 6 industries that we are talking about. You see the percentage of turnover that was happening, the highest in the telecom sector. About 24% turnover that happened in that sector. Hiring trends, you see the analytics team had about 60% hiring that was happening during that time. If you look at the voluntary separation trends, you realize very less people were involuntary separation trends, about that last 10% performance management, right? And that started taking center stage after the 6 to 8 months in COVID. Digital transformation in a lot of organizations was expedited. If they were doing something, they started doing it a lot faster. Work from home allowance, at least in 2 industries, which is the telecom and the management consulting industry, was provided. Refreshed EVP, everyone suddenly started thinking about the value prop that they bring, and you see a lot of refresh that was happening in those industries there. Leadership connects became very, very common in almost all industries except media and analytics. The CEO and the COO were directly interacting with the employees on a regular basis. Quarterly HR Connect, that frequency went up. Creation of COVID task force in all industries happened, and a revamped PCP that was launched for everyone. Now, what does that mean? Few things as observation as we move from now that we started in the state of disorder. We are moving into chaotic, where we are making some rapid decisions based on quick data that we have gathered. We realized there are 4 trends that we were seeing. Sustainability of remote ways of working is something which we had to look at. Can this be sustained? Organizations were looking to build well-being into every part of how they work. The EVP and the social media requirement, there was a huge push because That's how employees were starting to connect with their employer. The learning program suddenly saw this effectiveness go down and the no-shows were increasing in different programs that were done. Now this is the data that we have gathered till now, and what we want to do is we want to build upon it, which is to say, how does the remote work environment really play out as we move ahead? What are the changes that will happen? What are the policies that have to evolve for us to move into a best practice zone that we want to operate from, right? Just in terms of next steps, and Jolene has told me time up, so I'll just call out what is it that we want to do. We want to be able to compare trends based on the growth phase, the different companies that we spoke about that they are in. Does that make a difference in terms of how they are going about and making some decisions? Evaluate data from phase 3, which is phase 3 of COVID, and identify any shifts that happened from what we looked at in phase 2. List recommendations for the complex stage in terms of decision making. Thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate your patience.